Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Open RAN Show, Telecom TV's new monthly programme that takes an in-depth look at progress towards Open RAN commercialisation. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content. And first we launched the Open RAN Summit, then the Open RAN Channel, and now the Open RAN Show. Well, each month we're going to delve into key aspects of the Open RAN sector and talk to some of the main people driving the development and deployment of disaggregated multi-vendor radio access networks. And we have got a great lineup for this first show. We'll be hearing from senior executives at Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, NEC, Appledore Research, EANTC and TIP, the Telecom Infra Project. Plus, Vodafone's Iago Tenorio and NEC's Alla Goldner join us in a panel discussion, and we have the latest Open RAN news from Telecom TV's Deputy Editor, Yanica Boyadzieva. But first, let me introduce my colleague, Ray Lemaitre, Telecom TV's Editorial Director, who has been tracking Open RAN development since, well, for even longer than he can remember. Ray, why are we devoting a monthly programme just to Open RAN?
Well, Guy, apart from the latest cocktail recipes and the wholesale dark roast coffee bean futures, there are three things we track in our industry coverage at Telecom TV, and that's technology, money and people. And Open RAN as an alternative approach to building wireless access networks includes all three. It comes with the promise of innovation and efficiencies in the technology. It's attracting and increasing, though still currently small, slice of the operator's annual capex spend. And it has some of the most influential names in the telco industry banging the drum in support of Open RAN. And if it plays out as its supporters suggest, then it will be truly disruptive. And we need to track anything that's disruptive. In addition, 2023 has been cited as a critical year for the Open RAN sector, a year in which it could start to play a more significant role in brownfield rollout plans. So this is just a good time to be kicking off this show.
Yep, it sounds like it's perfect time. So Ray, what are we looking at in this first episode?
Well, we're getting a bit of an overview to start. Open RAN developments have been underway for a few years already, but for many people, including those who are keen to see Open RAN play a prominent role in cellular network architectures, things have not progressed quickly enough and there are not as many new names, new suppliers as some had hoped. So we're looking at what can be done to accelerate Open RAN and also whether the ecosystem still needs to grow and how that might happen. So with that in mind, I spoke earlier with Christian Toivo, the Executive Director at the Telecom Infra Project, or TIP, and asked him what he thought might help to speed up Open RAN developments.
One of the topics that we have been talking about through and within TIP, and it's also been discussed widely in the industry and in the various fora, is the need to make sure that we don't duplicate efforts, particularly integration and verification. And to that end, I think it's important that various initiatives that are being brought forward in the industry about creating alignment on the basic requirements and prioritized configurations, and then also establishing, let's say, a commercial grade integration and testing process that can facilitate solutions that are to a large extent on system level ready to be brought into the operator's final validation before deployment, that we get to that point. And that can also be facilitated by other actors like governments, as an example. In the United States, the NTIA's Wireless Innovation Fund is one of those tools that I believe will be used by industry players, and actually ourselves at TIP are engaging heavily in that process as well to see how we could enable or put forward solutions and proposals that would enable particularly this integration and readiness for solutions to be deployable, to be created. So I think we need a lot of different actions, not just technology related, but also a more, let's say, confidence and to some extent, maybe also some risk taking on the operator side.
Well, for sure, it would help if the various parties were all working together on the supporting processes such as testing and validation. But Christian mentions there that maybe the operator community needs to step up a bit and engage in some risk taking. Do you see Open RAN as risky, Guy?
Yes, I do, Ray, to an extent, but there is so much to gain. Telcos are somewhat risk averse in general, and quite rightly they need to make sure that any new equipment they procure, any new architectural strategy is absolutely bulletproof, compatible, reliable, and does the job required. Open RAN represents change, but I really do believe that that change is necessary.
Well, one thing that might help those operators that are a little bit wary is if they had a certain level of trust in the Open RAN systems and technology that they were looking to trial. And that's the view of Carsten Rossenheuvel, who is the Managing Director and co-founder of EANTC, the European Advanced Networking Test Centre, based in Berlin, who has been involved in multiple Open RAN plugfests and testing processes during the past few years. Here's what he had to say when I asked him what he thought might help to accelerate Open RAN developments.
Well, inherently, I think service providers are going to buy solutions if they trust them, if they trust that they can sustain the performance, scalability, manageability, security, and reliability aspects that service providers need in their production networks. And that trust, I think, has not been widely established yet. So naturally, with our company, with my area of expertise, I think quality assurance needs to be improved. There need to be as open and transparent data as possible, reporting about the actual status. That's what we've been doing at EANTC for like 25 years. We don't want to finger point to vendors that don't get their job done in the best way possible yet. But it's always good to disclose the actual state of the market in an anonymous way, and to also praise the successes in a named way where we name the vendors. So I think that's a great start with the Plugfest developments from the O-RAN Alliance. But we have to go beyond that step, beyond the functional testing and just the nice plugging and playing. We need to get to real scalability, performance testing, optimization testing, and all of the crucial areas that will gain the trust and will also explain the benefits of the technology at a much more detailed level to the service providers.
Yep, the trust factor, it's a big one. I mean, operators want to see other operators do stuff and then see what happens. And like Carsten said, they want to be sure they're not engaging with anything that's going to suck up time and resources and then not work. And maybe the Open RAN forums and bodies aren't shouting loud enough about what they're doing and about the progress being made.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Ray. Telecoms has a history of working behind closed doors in, nondescript meeting rooms with these technology experts who are all beavering away there without any recognition. Why don't we take a leaf out of the cloud and techco playbooks and shout louder? Open RAN's already achieved so much, and we need more openness here, and we need to earn more trust, as we've just heard, and we need to talk more.
Well, one person not afraid of talking about Open RAN progress is Iago Tenorio, Vodafone Fellow and Director of Network Architecture at the operator, and also the Chairman at TIP. When I asked him about the speed of developments, he addressed not only that topic, but also a particular and critical aspect of supplier diversity.
I think the progress is probably reasonable, to the scale of, the change, but nevertheless, I think things that will help us progress farther and faster. The first one, undoubtedly, is the silicon, and we are starting to see some movements like those from Marvell and from Qualcomm. I think we'll see more, and I think the next thing that we need to do is to clarify inline acceleration versus look-aside. Do they both have a role to play, or is one better than the other? Once we clarify that, having a good acceleration system will help Open RAN overcome the performance of incumbent architecture by 2024 or before 2024. That's kind of my estimation or my bet, if you may. So talking about advancing and talking about progress, what I'm saying is we will see Open RAN performing better and more efficiently than incumbent architecture by 2024, thanks to the silicon and thanks to the silicon players that are working in this space. I think if this happens, it's going to be a phenomenal progress. And I think even the incumbent architecture will probably start, converging into an off-the-shelf computing for baseband.
Well, Yago has always been hot on getting the silicon supply chain to be broader, and there certainly seems to be some movement there.
Yes, there does, and Yago has been hot for a number of years now on this subject, and he's absolutely right. I do hope these signs of early movement continue, because it's absolutely essential. And I think perhaps what we need is an industry-wide initiative around telecom silicon, and maybe that's a job for TIP. We should have a word with Yago next time.
Absolutely. And in other areas, though, there are plenty of people noting that the names cropping up in early Open RAN engagements aren't always new, and this raises questions about just how much the ecosystem is actually expanding. And that's a point that Francis Haysom at Appledore Research made when I spoke with him.
We're in that kind of sort of inflection point between what I would term is a future innovative role for Open RAN, and this Open RAN as what I would term is an alternative that can replace the traditional Chinese vendors as something that can be used in a procurement exercises. To some extent, we've seen that already with the announcements from Vodafone recently. They've been a very strong advocate of new ecosystems, trying out lots of things. But in terms of their most recent major procurement in the Open RAN area, that is very much based around procuring Open RAN solutions from Nokia, a traditional vendor, and also Samsung, a sort of new challenger vendor in the area, rather than it's a completely open ecosystem in which we're using lots of different components. That sort of integrated whole, if you like, a kind of virtual Chinese operator that can be used in the RFP, seems to be winning out at the moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's true that in terms of what we've seen so far from the traditional telcos, as opposed to the few greenfield Open RAN rollouts like Dish and Rakuten, it's mostly been engagement with familiar names for the most part. Do you think that might change this year, Guy?
I really hope so, Ray, because it's a little disappointing at the moment, and it does smack a bit of playing safe. I really hope we see a true open and extensive ecosystem of vendors and also developers. But I guess the integration issue remains a stumbling block for many telcos, and I don't think we yet know how that's going to pan out.
Yeah, you're absolutely on the money there, guys. So much of this is still about the integration hassles and challenges in these early days, which is why there's so much focus on that aspect of Open RAN right now.
Well, still to come on the Open RAN show, Ray goes head-to-head with Vodafone and NEC. But first, it's over to Telecom TV's deputy editor, Janica Bojadzieva, for a roundup of this month's major news and developments in Open RAN. Yanni.
Thanks, Guy. As the only major greenfield Open RAN network operator in Europe, Germany's 1&1 is set to attract a lot of news coverage in 2023. It started the turn of this year with the launch of its initial fixed wireless access service, called 5G at Home. It has been made available in 2 cities, Frankfurt and Karlsruhe, with plans to launch the service in 7 further towns and cities, including Hamburg and Munich, in the following weeks. The fixed wireless access service is provided by the same infrastructure and systems that will support the operator's 5G mobile services, which are due to be launched in the summer, when a roaming agreement with 1&1's current MVNO partner, Telefonica Germany, is due to be activated. According to 1&1, its current multi-vendor Open RAN network rollout, which is being planned and built by Rakuten Symphony, is based on servers from Dell and Supermicro, routers from Cisco, software from Rakuten Symphony and Mavenir, and antennas from NEC and communications components. But that infrastructure is rolling out at a slower pace than initially planned, as 1&1 has had issues with one of its neutral host suppliers, Vantage Towers. But despite the delays, 1&1 says it's still on course to meet its obligation to reach 50% of all German households with 5G services by the end of 2030, supported by around 12,600 radio masts and more than 500 regional data centers. We also have news from some of the industry bodies involved in the Open RAN ecosystem. The US-based Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions, also known as ATIS, has signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the O-RAN Alliance, with the aim of advancing the development of Open RAN technologies. The agreement includes the potential for ATIS to adopt O-RAN Alliance specifications as ATIS Open RAN standards. Igor Elbas, who is chair of the ATIS Board of Directors, as well as being a member of the O-RAN Alliance Board and Network CTO at AT&T, noted that the work towards open radio access networks is critical in unlocking the full potential of 5G in North America, and will lay the foundation for future generations of wireless technology. He also said the collaboration between the two industry bodies will help to accelerate the industry's implementation of Open RAN. In other news from the O-RAN Alliance, it has announced the opening of 2 further open testing and integration centers, known as OTICs, taking the total to 9. The new locations are in Yokosuka in Japan and New York City in the US. The Alliance also noted that the O-RAN software community has published its 7th open software release, and that the number of project streams has been expanded to 13, with the addition of a new artificial intelligence and machine learning framework project. And as you'd expect, the Alliance will have a presence at the upcoming MWC23 event in Barcelona. It says more than 60 Alliance members will showcase their solutions, either on the show floor or via the organization's virtual exhibition. It will also host an update on its developments during a live presentation to be held on Tuesday, the 28th of February at 3:30 p.m. on the Deutsche Telekom stand in Hall 3. Here at TelecomTV, we expect to hear a lot more about RAN intelligent controller developments in 2023. And we've already had some RIC news from Japan, where KDDI has conducted what it claims is the world's first demonstration of service-level agreement guaranteed network slicing, using a RIC in a commercial base station. KDDI stated that the field showcase, which was able to generate multiple network slices, was completed with Samsung after the two companies developed a mechanism to track and make use of information about real-time changes in the network. And Microsoft Azure says it's working on an extension of the RIC platform for Open RAN architectures that enables the controller to extract real-time live data from RAN software in a dynamic fashion for new RAN control applications. Azure believes its development can help operators achieve better network monitoring and performance optimization for their 5G networks, and enable new AI analytics and automation capabilities. Vendor news now. Mavenir is looking to land a slice of the growing fixed wireless access network equipment sector, with the launch of its own FWA system package. It comprises Mavenir's open virtualized RAN software, its converged packet core platform, and its open beam radio units. Fixed wireless access is gaining traction in multiple markets, especially in the US, thanks to the efforts of specialist network operators, as well as mobile giants such as T-Mobile and Verizon. A recent forecast from ABI Research suggested the global 5G fixed wireless access subscriptions might reach 58 million by 2026. Back to you, Guy.
Thank you, Jenny. And a reminder that you can stay up to date with all the Open RAN news by following Telecom TV online and via your inbox. Okay, so we've covered the growth and challenges of the Open RAN ecosystem, commercial deployments and the silicon supply chain. But Ray, what's the view from the suppliers?
Well, one of the big name companies that's been getting plenty of traction as a technology supplier, but primarily as a systems integrator in early Open RAN engagements is NEC. And I asked its Director of Strategy, Open Standards, Alla Goldner, what NEC had learned from its early engagements.
We learned several things, several challenges. So first of all, I would mention brownfield deployment as one major challenge. As for brownfield deployment, we have to integrate and to work side by side with traditional vendors. And there are several interfaces which are optional by standard and not always supported by those traditional vendors, but key for those integrations and for those brownfield deployment. And we go through those. This is one of the challenges that we face. Second thing, I would mention the innovative use cases, because just price reduction by itself is not sufficient at this point, is not sufficient to make it through, to make it into the real deployment. And some innovation use cases which bring monetizations are needed. Obviously, energy efficiency is the thing which everyone is discussing, and we hear lots of requirements in this regard from service providers. We are strongly working on that.
Well, NEC has certainly emerged as one of the pivotal players in the early efforts of some of the major operators such as Vodafone, Telefonica and Deutsche Telekom. Do you think we'll end up with a core group of major integrators like NEC that will team up with a lot of operators?
Yeah, I think we will, Ray. I think you're right. That seems to be the most likely scenario. I mean, we want innovation. So we want a more diverse ecosystem, yet at the same time, we need interoperability. And I think it's far easier for telcos to do with just a handful of suppliers. So I think the role and influence of these new integrators is going to grow significantly.
Yep. Well, we also spoke with Franz Seiser from Deutsche Telekom to get an update on where the German giant is with its Open RAN plans.
Our trials in Neubrandenburg, our Oran town, in the meantime have come to an end, and we have assessed our learnings. As you rightfully said, that was quite a ride over a couple of months. We basically started at zero. So when we started the whole thing, there was hardly anything available in the ecosystem. So we brought the players together. We brought them together working, doing horizontal, doing vertical integration. We came across a couple of issues as expected. Some of them probably more expected, some less, but it was super valuable learning. As you also know, as part of the journey, we did the first massive MIMO call in the European network. So we really took a lot out of that, understanding what's going well already, where did we have the biggest trouble, where did we have to go extra deep to make things working, and also see the performance of the solution, stability, all these type of things have been evaluated thoroughly, and now are part of our next steps to see how close are we to be able to deploy the technology large scale in a brownfield European network. And as announced by our board member, Claudia Nehmert, in early December at our Netztag, unfortunately, we had to conclude it's not yet fully ready for large scale deployment in our network. So we are revising a little bit. We're not giving up. We're not stepping down. We're just adapting to the speed we see in the industry.
Okay, well, interesting developments there in Germany, which is where, of course, 1&1 is building out one of the first major greenfield Open RAN networks, and that's a development that we'll be tracking here on the show in the coming months.
Indeed we will. Okay, let's now take a bit of a deeper dive into the topics of Open RAN sector acceleration and vendor diversity now, with a more in-depth discussion featuring a couple of our special guests. And Ray, you moderated a panel discussion earlier, so let's now hear what you all had to say.
I'm delighted to have a couple of fantastic guests on our very first Open RAN show panel. So let's welcome Alla Goldner, Director of Strategy Open Standards at NEC, and Iago Tenorio, Vodafone Fellow and Director of Network Architecture at Vodafone Group, as well as Chairman at TIP, the Telecom Infra Project. So thanks both for joining us. Great to have you on the show today. Now, there's a general consensus that some areas of Open RAN development need to be accelerated to push things along and to help make it easier for more operators to take their first meaningful steps with open multi-vendor radio access network deployments. Alla, let's come to you first. In terms of speeding up the time to market for Open RAN deployments, what particular challenges need to be overcome most urgently? What needs to be addressed right now?
I would say the first thing is interoperability and testing. And there are lots of efforts being done on that area, both from the specification perspective and from testing perspective, testing itself. Oran Alliance is doing a great job in actually specifying those interoperability or interfaces testing between the different network functions and end-to-end as well for full Oran solution. You know, there is that TIP badging procedure, both for solutions and for separate network functions. Of course, Oran Plugfest, a joint one with TIP as well, where lots of different use cases are tested. But I would say we probably need more formalized approach, more of a backing of by the service providers and requirements by the service providers of a more mandatory interoperability procedures, also with traditional vendors, among traditional vendors and new vendors. Now, second thing I would say is about security, and we see that demand and those concerns raised about security, especially during the last year. And then again, Oran Alliance is doing quite a lot of work. A work group 11 was formally established last year, and there are many work streams there, doing AML security, doing front haul security, CUDU security, open source Oran related aspect security. I think that work must be completed. It is essential. It is very important to bring that highest level of security to Oran so service providers can feel confident, fully confident. But again, I think that the work is now maturing and the progress has been very, very, very significant. And the last thing, but probably the most important one, is about the scale. In order for Oran to be successful, we as a vendors have to move to scale deployment so we can also be cost effective. And there are lots of deployments right now of Oran, but unfortunately, most of them are still limited deployment, trial deployment, and we really need more. We really need a scale there. We really need a bigger commitment by service providers so we can take on those new functionalities implementation, new releases implementation, and be successful, be cost effective on that.
Okay, thanks, Alla. And Iago, which types of companies are in the driving seat when it comes to pulling the market along? Is it the telcos, the network operators, or is it the vendors, or even the integrators, or maybe the industry bodies such as TIP and the ORAN Alliance?
I think everybody has a role, and I think you name most of, I think, the essential roles for this to be happening and happening faster. So I think fully aligned with what Alla was saying. So we have TIP and ORAN working on the standardization and on the specification, which is essential. Then you have the vendors betting on Open RAN to happen, adopting that specification and that standard and implementing it. You probably didn't mention, but I think it's very important, the silicon vendors. So they are key to actually make this efficient and performing well. And then you have the telco. So arguably, if I had to say who's at the driving seat, I think it would be the operator. And this may backfire actually, but at the end, the operator are the one making the choice of what sort of architecture, what kit, what vendor they are going to be deploying. And I'm totally aligned with Alla here. I think we need to see more deployments, bigger deployments, faster deployments that will get the supply chain moving. So at the end, everybody's doing this for operators to make their choice and deploy Open RAN kit on the field. And I'm hoping that that's what we are going to start seeing more often in volumes, in scale in 2023.
Okay, yes, I think there's a lot of people hoping to see a lot more names and a lot more scale, as Ala mentioned, in terms of what's happening in Open RAN in the course of the next 12 months. Now, a lot has changed in recent years in many different ways. I mean, when Open RAN was starting to make its mark, the world, let alone the telecom sector, was a very different place. Have the drivers for Open RAN changed in, say, the past 3 years? Iago, let's come to you first on this.
No, I don't think they changed. So if you think, 3 years back, it's 2020. So we were at the beginning of the pandemics. We probably didn't know what was coming to us, but the drivers and the reasons why Open RAN was a good idea back then, I think are the same ones as the ones that make it, necessary today, which is, in my view, first of all, supplier diversity. So we need more players on this ecosystem for the ecosystem to remain healthy and competitive and innovative. And in fact, the second one would be innovation per se. So we're doing this to have more options, to create optionality. That optionality will bring competition, that competition will bring innovation, and that innovation and competition will bring a reduced cost, a reduction in the total cost of ownership for operators. In that, I think, respect, nothing has changed. Now, you may argue that if you actually go backwards a couple of years more, or maybe another 3, so 6 years in total, Open RAN was probably seen as a solution that would fit rural environments, and it was seen as a potentially lower cost for addressing unpopulated areas where deployment was uneconomical before this would come. That was maybe, the driver at the early days, at the beginning, but very soon after that, and certainly by 2020, the scope would have changed already, and we would be targeting urban areas that we're hitting today. So I think, the driver was the right one, and I think we're making progress. But at the end, Open RAN ended up not being a solution for a certain niche market. It ended up being a full-blown solution that can compete head-to-head in performance and cost with the incumbent architecture. And that's what we are seeing today.
Okay, thanks, Iago. And Ala, are you seeing anything new in terms of market requirements and demands?
Well, I would say that it moved a little bit into the aspects of the business values that ORAN brings, not just in terms of, vendor variety and testing those open interfaces and cloud deployment and bringing all that, which is important, very important, of course. But then we also recently, in the last few years, do hear much more a discussion on what would be the business justification and what would be those ORAN specific use cases which justify the deployments. So, for example, in TIP, the next release 2.2 is supposed to look into the RAN sharing use case, RAN slice SLA assurance use cases which we probably heard less 1, 2, 3 years ago. Now, and especially with SA deployment and with slicing, plan to be deployment are coming more into the game and into the discussion. Now, second thing I think, which is new and we had major development last year, was actually inclusion of ORAN specification, recognition of ORAN specification as EANTC standard. So the first one, but definitely not the last one, because the work is ongoing, is ORAN front haul specification, more to come. And also just this week, we had an announcement of ATIS signing memorandum of understanding with ORAN Alliance, and actually the perspective of ORAN Alliance specification being recognized by ATIS. And I believe this is extremely important for the industry perception and industry acceptance of ORAN specification and ORAN as a technology. Now, the last thing, would be about 6G. And of course, 6G is not yet in the picture, but the industry is talking about that. And there are already discussions, some discussion also in ITU, whether ORAN should be a basis of 6G architecture, of 6G technology. And of course, this is also an area where we strongly believe in ORAN future being a part of 6G. And I think these discussions started, especially last year, and this discussion will emerge and will have a very significant continuation this year and next year, when actually 6G standardization is supposed to start 2024.
And just sticking with this theme, Jago, would it be fair to say that energy efficiency in networks has risen up the stack in terms of its importance in recent times, or has that always been an important aspect of the Open RAN proposition?
I think, in fairness, I think it's always been the case. The same as with the rest of the RAN, with single RAN, with any architecture in the RAN, energy has always been looked at and is always been part of the specification. What happens is that throughout the latest crisis, the price of energy has exacerbated this problem. So it sort of crept, from being at the top 10 agenda to probably being at the top of that agenda. So operators are now looking at that as the number one kind of thing to look after, not only in the configuration of a network, the rollout, the specification of the hardware, but also, and more importantly, on the innovation side of things. So what sort of features are coming that are going to help energy efficiency? So the importance of it and the priority has changed, and the price of energy has driven that kind of change. But conceptually, energy has always been part of the specification and has always been important.
Okay, thank you. And Ala, is this something that's cropping up more in discussions between NEC and its customers? Has this risen up the stack in terms of what you're talking about?
Yes, of course. Of course, that comes into discussion. I cannot agree more with what Jago said. We are fully aware and hear from our customers about those emerging use cases and those emerging needs of ORAN. And of course, this is in the center of our discussion, and NEC is building a functionality, of course, around it.
Okay, excellent. Now, one of the key drivers behind Open RAN has always been that it can enable a broader ecosystem of suppliers for network operators, as you mentioned earlier, Jago. But how's that actually working out? Does the Open RAN ecosystem still need to be broader? And if so, what hurdles need to be overcome to enable that? Ala, let's come to you first.
So first of all, we strongly believe it has to be broader. It has to be stronger. It has to include more players. And the point is that when I say players, it is not just players on the network side. As I said, since we are aware that business justification and business use cases are required for ORAN in order to mature, in order to move on, then actually we do believe strongly that those innovative, applications providers which can bring near real-time application, non-real-time application for those specific use cases are very important. So I think that, again, ORAN Plugfest, perhaps some TIP-related activities are a great platform for executing those activities. And those are players that we would like to see more and more. Innovation is there as well, right? Of course, big company bring innovation, but we do need those fresh minds to come into industry and to bring their application to prove ORAN value. And of course, we welcome those, and we would like to work with those also in those, industry platforms, such as those that I mentioned, ORAN Alliance, TIP, and others.
Okay. And I mean, can NEC play a specific role here? Can it help to encourage, even nurture, and help to bring new names into the frame?
Well, I do believe so, right? NEC is working quite a lot, both with the inside of NEC, with the companies it's acquired, and also with the external company. Let me just say that even during the last year, only 1 year, NEC has acquired Blue Danube, which was a small company specializing in radio equipment. And then later in the year, NEC acquired Aspire, specializing in interoperability and testing of ORAN. And by the way, Aspire was active in ORAN Flagfest even before NEC acquired those, and active in TIP as well. So NEC strongly believes in those things, and actually for some of those, NEC even did more steps and actually went and acquired those. But not just that, right? We are working also with external players, and we are fully open. We welcome those players to come and work with us.
And Iago, does the Open RAN sector even need more developers and vendors? I mean, won't that complicate matters in terms of integration and interoperability?
That's a question I get very often. I was missing it. So yeah, thank you. In my view, it's necessary. And you need to differentiate ecosystem from your operator choice in a given market. Those are two different things. So the ecosystem in the radio, before Open RAN came, has reduced to a point that I don't think is sustainable anymore. You only have 3 relevant players, and one is actually challenged in some markets. You cannot use it. So it's down to 2 players, and 2 players is not enough for the ecosystem to be healthy, competitive, innovative. So you need more players, and I think that is out of question. Then there is a differentiation between ecosystem size and your choice for deployment. And it's your choice for deployment that determines the interoperability complexity, not the ecosystem size. So we need a bigger ecosystem, bigger than what we can see today, for sure. Because, as we said before, this is the main driver for Open RAN, is to create optionality. So when you're going to decide which vendors you're going to deploy in your given market, you want to have a relatively decent pool, optionality, and a number of choices that you can make. And then you reduce that to a stack that is practically feasible, and you run the interoperability. You may argue, yes, but the combinatory is not in your favor. So if you have 50 players on the ecosystem, there are too many combinations and the interoperability becomes complex. Well, no, that's not what drives complexity, the number of combinations. What drives complexity is, if you have different profiles, or if you have different processes, or if all these vendors are working to different specifications or a fragmented standard. That is what we need to manage, and that's what we need to make sure that it's not the case. And then you have to run anyway that system integration part of the job. As we always say, we are far away from a simply plug and play system that, trusting that everybody's going to follow the standard and the specification. You just put it together and it works and you don't need to do anything. Well, that's not the case between the radio and the core, and it's never been the case. You have to actually do some interoperability before you bring it to service. The radio will be the same. But it's not a combination that drives complexity. It's your choice of a stack. So even if the ecosystem grows to have 100 players, you're not going to have to integrate them all for making it work in your market. You probably make a choice and you'll have a simpler stack that counts with 4 or 5 different companies, and then you run IoT there, hopefully with a very good, simplified, standardized, harmonized template that makes it more agile and faster.
Okay, excellent. Well, a great point to end on there, and fantastic insights for our first Open RAN show. Alla and Iago, thanks very much for sharing your insights today. Thank you.
Well, that's almost the end of our first monthly show. Don't forget you can find a wealth of information on Open RAN over in the dedicated channel on the Telecom TV website. Plus, we have our 4th annual Open RAN Summit online later this year in June. Register now if you want to be kept informed of speakers and topics. And if you don't receive our daily 7 a.m. mailer, why not? You're missing out. You get the latest Open RAN news and so much more straight to your inbox. Just sign up on the website. Well, next month we turn our attention to the RAN Intelligent Controller and we ask the obvious question, is Rick there?
Yes, well, that's right, Guy. We'll be looking at the RIC in all its flavours and glory, and the X apps and R apps that come with it in the next show, which we'll be making available ahead of this year's Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, where I expect we'll be hearing a lot more about Open RAN developments and the potential of RIC platforms. I'm looking forward to it, and of course, if you're heading to MWC with some major Open RAN developments to share, well, be sure to get in touch with us. You can find me on LinkedIn and via email with a super simple address, ray@telecomtv.com.
And that really is all we have time for this month. Let us know what you think. Contact Ray and I via the usual channels. But until next month, thank you for watching and goodbye.